Doug, what's up, bro?
Hey, the rain's up. Yeah. By the way, if we're running a little bit late, you're wondering where we are. We were all set to go, and then the clouds opened up and it started raining. So, anyways, we had to move inside.
We had to move inside.
So here we are.
Here we are. We're actually here on Signal Mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're inside the living room or
Oh, it's a kitchen.
The kitchen. Yeah. And we're gonna.
Yeah, kitchens have these kinds of tables.
Okay. Doug he's making fun of me today or something. So what's been going on, Doug?
Gosh,
how was your week?
It was good.
Yeah. Did you do anything special?
No, riding a motorcycle.
Oh, okay. So you still ride your motorcycle?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's a very relaxing thing for me to do.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk with people who ride bikes, they'll tell you that the phrase is getting into the wind. And it's just a very relaxing thing to do, at least for me. So that's so I've been doing a little bit of that.
And how often do you do that, Doug?
Well, a lot depends on the weather, but spring, summer, or fall, even the wintertime around here, there's an old saying that there's no such thing as inclement weather, just a poor choice of clothing.
So like the Marine was. Well, go ahead.
Yeah. So anyways, I like doing that, and it's good.
And it's something to. It's kind of like what we like the kayaking. It's something to do to kind of keep you in a positive. It doesn't keep you in a positive state. Helps you to relax, feel good.
Yeah, that's it. It's more of a relaxing thing. And the other thing about the motorcycles is, I'm not a speed demon.
Okay, I was going to ask you that.
No, I'm not a speed.
And are you
demon.
hanging out? Are you in a club, or are you just hanging out by yourself?
Well, I do a lot of riding by myself. Okay, but I'm in two different clubs. One's the.
I'm sorry. I'm just.
One's the Chattanooga Ski Club, and they've got motorcycle riders in there. And we went for a ride on Saturday, with a ski club. And then the local Harley dealership has what's called a Hogs Club. It stands for Harley Owners Group. And there's a lot of guys there that ride. We just show up at the dealership and go for a ride. So two clubs, and I probably ride by myself as much as anything.
Wow.
So
wow.
There's in this part of the country around Chattanooga and North Georgia and the Blue Ridge Mountains and that sort of thing is just absolutely beautiful terrain for riding, and especially right around Signal Mountain. I've got this little circuit that I go on that's about 78, 80 miles, and I go down Signal Mountain near the Tennessee River, up a canyon called Suck Creek, and then down the Sequatchie Valley, and it's just beautiful.
Nice.
Yeah, just good. Sitting there.
Yeah, good way to take care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, what about this? I actually got a chance to watch the Sunday service.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, it was great. You did a great job.
Well, thanks.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Yeah. So, what did you have any takeaways from that? Or I mean, we got definitely from what I heard. We got a large response from people about.
Yeah, that's what Penny tells me. Also, a lot of
comments.
First of all, a lot of people watched it. Okay, and secondly, the responses were very, very positive. That sort of thing.
It's funny because I got a text message today on my personal phone.
Yeah.
From someone that asked for me to. I didn't get a chance to share your sermon on YouTube. I tried to share it on YouTube during the week, but it didn't. I was having some technical issues with sharing it, and so the person texted me and was like, hey, I'd like to share this with some friends, and it's not there, and they noticed it wasn't there. So I thought that was interesting because we've never had anyone reach out to me that want to share the video to other people. So I think it's,
that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's the message, the unity message is starting to just spread. People are really interested in knowing more
that's
about
good.
what we're talking about. So.
Well, one of the things about, by the way, this is the book here, Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins. It's interesting because in a half an hour talk you can only hit the highlights. Yeah. And if you watch the service, I went pretty fast. Just to hit some of the hierarchy, and there's so much more really that can be talked about. And the reason that I chose this particular topic is one of the things that we talk about in Unity is personal spiritual growth.
Right.
And so for those of us who are a little more linear, okay, you almost need a path. What does that look like? And if I can see what the path is, then I can follow it and I make progress. But if you oftentimes just say, well, prayer and meditation, that's good, okay, but it doesn't give that. It doesn't give some of the detail that at least I needed.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why I chose it. To give a little more
it's like a
description.
Yeah, it's a
little more
yeah.
description to the spiritual journey. And so now that there's a couple of things, you can see I've got it all dog-eared and earmarked here. There are a few more things that I'd like to talk about. And that's just okay. Now that we know what the calibrations are, now that we know what the path of various emotions look like, what good does that do us? So if we're approaching a particular situation, okay, and we approach it obviously with our own consciousness, and how we approach a situation determines the outcome, in many cases. So what does that look like? What can we do with that kind of information? So I'd like to read you one particular section here. Now this will take a little bit, but here's what he says. This is on page 240. Let's attempt to better understand all of this through a concrete example. Imagine a bum on a street corner. In an upscale neighborhood stands an old man in tattered clothes, alone and leaning against the corner of an elegant brownstone. Look at him from the perspective of various levels of consciousness and note the inconsistency in how he appears to different people and viewpoints. So I would just encourage our listeners, imagine a bum in a very nice neighborhood, your neighborhood, leaning against a brownstone, and imagine what you might think about that. Here's what Hawkins says, all right? From the bottom of the scale at a level of 20, which is shame, the bum is seen as dirty, disgusting, and disgraceful.
Oh my God.
From level 30, guilt, he'd be blamed for his condition. He deserves what he gets. He's probably a lazy welfare cheat. At 50, which is hopelessness, his plight would appear desperate, a damning piece of evidence to prove that society can't do anything about homelessness. At 75, which is grief, the old man looks tragic, friendless, and forlorn. At a conscious level of 100, fear, we might see the bum as threatening, a social menace. Perhaps we should call the police before he commits some crime. At 125, which is desire, he might represent a frustrating problem. Why doesn't somebody do something? At 150, anger, the old man might look like he could be violent. And on the other hand, one could be furious that such horrible conditions exist in our country today. At 175, which is pride, he could be seen as an embarrassment or as lacking self-respect to better himself. At 200, now remember, 200 is the line where we go from, At 200, we might be motivated to wonder if there's a homeless shelter. All he needs is a job and a place to live. At 250, neutrality, the bum looks okay, maybe even interesting. Live and let live, we might say. After all, he's not hurting anyone. At 310, willingness, we might decide to go down and see what we can do to cheer up the old fellow on the corner. Maybe we'd be motivated to volunteer some time at a local shelter. At 350, acceptance, the man on the corner appears intriguing. He probably has an interesting story to tell. He's where he is for reasons we may never understand. At 400, which is reason, he's a symptom of the current economic and social malaise, or perhaps a good subject for in-depth psychological study. At the higher levels, the old man begins to look not only interesting but friendly, and then lovable. Perhaps we'd then be able to see that he was, in fact, one who had transcended social limits and gone free A joyful old guy with the wisdom of age on his face and the serenity that comes from indifference to material things. At 600, which is peace, he's revealed as our own self in a temporary expression. Now, here's the interesting part. When approached, the bum's response to these different levels of consciousness would vary with them. With some, he'd feel secure. With others, frightened or dejected. Some would make him angry. Others would delight him. Some he'd avoid. Others he'd greet with pleasure. And so it's said that we meet what we mirror. And then it goes on from there. But it's interesting, and the reason that
so where we are on this scale determines how we see situations,
how we perceive them,
how we perceive these situations, and it behooves us to try to get to does it behoove us to try to get to a higher level of consciousness so that we don't see? I mean,
well, I think the first thing to do is realize where you're at.
Acknowledge.
This is where so you see, that's why I ask our listeners. So imagine, you're in your neighborhood. Here's this guy, and he's leaning up. What were your feelings?
Right.
Okay. Right. Well, what did you think about all of that?
Yeah.
Because
that determines where you are.
Exactly.
And how you see things.
Exactly. Yeah. And once you can peg that, once you can see that,
and accept it. It's not only seeing it, but really accepting that this is where I am. I mean, and that takes time and work just to do that.
It takes a lot of work.
Yeah, because I mean, it can be a lot of denial, especially if you're on the lower end of the scale.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
And some people, and we have examples all up and down the line. You're at a party, in comes a person that you know fairly well, and you might say, "Oh, this is great. He's going to have some funny stories. He's a likable guy." Or in comes a person, you say, "Oh man, we're going to hear about this again," for the 400th time. There are some people that you kind of match energy and you feel good around. There's others that you just don't want to be around.
Yeah.
And we can see others typically more clearly than we can see ourselves.
Wow.
So the idea here, know thyself is that's Greek philosophy. It's not, that phrase is not in the Bible to the best of my knowledge. But the whole idea is to be able to know where we are on the spiritual continuum, what triggers us, what sorts of things in our past have kind of brought us to here, okay? And where do we want to go from here? Do we like where we are? Fine, okay. If we want to have something a little greater in our life, then these are the sorts of things that make sense.
And what kind of things can we do to raise that consciousness?
Well,
I mean, and I'm sure we've talked about it already, but just for the purpose of the viewers that are watching, I'm sure they'd like to know if they're if they've imagined what we just told them to imagine, and they're experiencing a low number, and they want to kind of raise that vibration. What are some of the things they can do to kind of?
Well, one of the things I would encourage people, again, know thyself. In other words, what sorts of things bring you joy? What sorts of things bring you laughter? What sorts of things do you enjoy doing? What kind of people do you enjoy being around? One of the things that I always told people about church, was just simply, they would often say, "Well, obviously, Doug, you're going to encourage me to go to a unity church." And I would look at them and I'd say, "Well, I think that's a good choice, obviously, because
you're feeling,
what I've done." But what I would usually tell people is find a church where, number one, you feel inspired with the message, not angry, not hanging your head because you're guilt and shame, but you feel inspired. You feel good about yourself. That's number one. Number two, go to a church where you enjoy the people around you. All right. Why? Because energies are matching there. All right. So feel good with the talk, that you're inspired. You like the people that you're around. And then the third thing, all of that is internal. But in order for you to make any significant progress, you've got to take that into the world. So number three is find a church where you can participate in some of the things that they either do internally, like teaching in Sunday school maybe, or being an usher, or whatever it is, or something that they do in the community where you can go out and you can assist others. And it doesn't necessarily mean trying to convince people to come to your church. It's actually service to others, that sort of thing. So that's one thing. In the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, for example, he talks about the right way, the right thinking, the right aspirations, the right job, the right sort of things that you do. And so that is all of that third. How do you go into the community? Because what's happening there is you're basically allowing higher energy to flow through you. And the more that you let it flow through you, the greater your circuits are going to become, and the more you're going to feel that positive energy. Now, in addition to that, also prayer and meditation. But prayer is not begging and beseeching. Prayer is just simply a conversation with God. It's talking about your aspirations. It's talking about where you want to go. If you've got a particular problem that you're dealing with, then affirmative prayer is, which is what Unity teaches, is a beautiful way to do it. And affirmative prayer just simply means this condition exists in my life, but it does not have power over me. This is what I want to see in my life, and you start going in that direction. Meditation is often, I call it a concentration exercise, but meditation is simply listening to your guidance. It's becoming still. It's letting all that stuff in the world kind of just go away. And by the way,
when you say listening to your guidance, it's very important. Like, how do you know the positive guidance from the negative guidance? Like, how do you I think I would know, like, when God is speaking to me and when I'm following something that's not healthy. But I guess people would know that. I'm asking my own question.
Well, the acid test to that is simply whatever you get. What's the feeling associated with it? And for example,
like I'm sorry.
Well, what I was going to say, when an engineer approaches a problem, given their training, whether it's mechanical, electrical, or whatever it is, they can usually see a variety of solutions. They could say, well, we could do it this way, or we could do it this way, or we could do it this way, or we could do it. That's all up here, okay? And then one of those seems to be the right way to go, and he says, okay, this is what we're going to do, and he does his design work, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, in the same way, if you're in meditation and you start seeing or hearing or feeling this path, this path, this path, this path, one of those is going to feel better than the others. Okay, now one of them is going to get your anger up, and oh boy, here's revenge, and revenge is juicy, and this is what I'm going to do.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
What's happening there is you're hurting somebody else, and in the process of getting revenge, that type of energy is going to flow through you, and pretty soon it's going to show up in your life. So you don't want to go that way. So the idea, the acid test of your guidance is: does it benefit you? Does it benefit everybody else in the scenario? Okay. Now I'll give you an example of that. Years ago, some people came in for a counseling session, and the bank was about ready to foreclose. Okay, so they said, "So what do we do?" And I said, I gave them some personal advice, about banks and bankruptcy and that sort of thing. But then I said, "Well, what's your prayer life like?" And they kind of looked at me like deer in the headlights. I said, "Okay, so here's what your prayer needs to be. It's not only for your benefit, but also the banks, okay? Because the bank's foreclosing. Why? Because they're about ready to lose, okay? So you want everybody to win." And they looked at me like I was from Mars.
Yeah, crazy.
You want me to pray for the bank? And I said, everybody's got to win in this.
Right. Yeah.
And so we did that, and I wrote out a couple of prayers for him. And what happened, I don't remember the exact series of events, but what happened is all of a sudden there was another bank who came in, kind of rescued the whole thing, paid off the first bank, saved their.
Everybody won.
Everybody won.
Yeah.
You know, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
So
you're doing that even if it's not, even if it doesn't feel right, because that may not feel right for some people that have been resonating at that level for such a low level for such a long time.
Well, if there's a lot of revenge there, you know, and I think I told you the story, you know, about the lady who called in on Silent Unit.
Yeah,
who wanted the revenge.
She's like, I want him
prayer.
dead. Yeah,
Yeah, right. Yeah, so we don't do that. We don't do revenge prayers.
Yeah.
And the idea is once you understand how affirmative prayer works, then you can go in that direction. There's another thing that I wanted to mention to you here. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Some people say, well, you know, this path is all well and nice. This PhD developed it. You know, is there any correlation to other systems? You know, and I mentioned that Maslow's hierarchy is similar.
Maslow, yeah.
For those of you who are familiar with Abraham Hicks, they said something very similar.
Emotional guidance scale.
Yeah. Here's what he says. Attitudes, emotions, and behaviors characteristic of energy fields below 200 do, in fact, generally preclude spiritual experience. Okay. The classical chakra system, recognized by many spiritual disciplines, correlates almost exactly with Hawkins' map of consciousness that has emerged from our studies. The level of 600 corresponds to the Crown Chakra, 500 to the heart, 200 and up to the solar plexus, while the lower attitudes and emotions of spite, envy, resentment, and jealousy are associated with the spleen.
Oh,
Now here's something else we just touched.
So
Go ahead.
You're saying that you touched on these the body organs associated with the numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. So talk a little bit more about that. Like, tell me a little bit more about the body organs associated with the
energy levels.
Yeah. Why is it associated with
Are you
that?
familiar with the chakra system?
I am familiar to some extent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, our listeners may not be, or some listeners may not be. The chakra system basically is a series of energies. Classically, there's 7, and they are different. There's different colors associated with them. There's different sounds. Sound is vibration associated with them, and they typically begin around the hips, and they go all the way up, to the, through the top of the head, and
the
that
crown,
sort of
they
thing.
call it.
Yeah, the crown chakra. And basically what it is those are where certain energies that you have access to that not only control your body but control the energy in there. For example, have you ever if you've had a very big disappointment, okay, sometimes you say, well, my heart hurts.
Right.
Okay. All right. There's been love lost. Okay, and you can feel it right there. On another, as another example, let's say that you just got some very bad news about something personal. You could feel it in the pit of your stomach.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. On the other hand, some of the higher levels, when you experience vibrations in there, you feel pretty good. You know, so the chakra system, as a matter of fact, I might talk about that in a couple of weeks, if there's some interest there. But the chakra system is very, very old. It goes back to India, and Hinduism and Buddhism, but many spiritual seekers. And for
does
those,
Unity associate the body organs with?
Yes,
they do.
Yeah.
There's 12
Well, the 12 powers, we'll talk about that, but at least in ministerial school, we talked about the chakra systems a little bit. That's not something that the Fillmores hung out with. You know, they had their own system, that sort of thing. But you know, the chakra system is well known to many spiritual seekers. As a matter of fact, you've probably heard that some people can see auras. Some psychics can read energy, and that's what they're seeing. Edgar Cayce, for example, the well-known psychic in the middle 1900s, could see those energy patterns. As a matter of fact, there was one particular time he was in a building, and he went up to the elevator opened, and he did not see any energy patterns around the people, okay, which was very unusual. And he said, "Nah, I don't think so." So he backed away, the elevator closed, and the cable snapped.
Wow.
And all of those people, you know.
So that not seeing the energy meant that they were
Yeah,
dying?
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So anyways, the chakras, again, there's sound, which is vibration, there's color, which is a vibration, and some people can see those, and I can't. Not, let's put it this way, not in the level of vibrant colors. You know, I can sense some things, but there's people in our congregation years ago who could very clearly see that.
We were talking to someone
about
that. I don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Christ consciousness, Doug. Christ consciousness. What is Christ consciousness?
Christ consciousness.
Yeah.
Well, I can't speak from personal experience. Okay, I'm not there yet. Christ consciousness, from what we know of people who have experienced it, you know, Jesus said simply, the Father and I are one. And he spoke from that level. It's the highest energy pattern available on this plane of existence.
Wow.
Okay. Now, there's the angelic realms, there's the archangel realms, there's realms beyond that. Okay. In some disciplines, they will say that on this plane of energy, there are 12 levels, okay, of which number 12 is Christ consciousness. And the number 12 always means completion. All right. The Buddha,
and is that self-actualization like on Maslow's hierarchy of need? Would that be considered the same?
Self-actualization, to me, okay, and I could probably look it up, you know, and take, but the self-actualization is the peak of the triangle with Maslow. Right. And I would think that would be associated more with the high 500s, 600 level. And why do I say that? Because 500 is the level of love, okay? And self-actualization, it talks about people who are doing whatever they're doing it with a loving, very positive energy that not only benefits themselves but everybody else. You know, I mean, I'm not talking about the John Dillingers here who are doing it because they like to do it. Okay, what I'm saying is this is the Mother Teresa's. These are the you know those types. So I would say Maslow's self-actualization
about 500.
Yeah, 500, 600.
But Christ consciousness is
way above that.
And you're saying there's certain people that have achieved that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Can we talk about you said, do you feel like Mother Teresa achieved that? Or do you think that people can go, they don't stay there, they can kind of go up
well,
and down?
let's put it this way, and I'm trying to remember the guy's name.
Buddha was probably a person.
Well, Buddha, you know, was in around the 1,000 area, and there are stories of those people where you know, they can lay the body down and they can peer over here. You know, they don't necessarily need the body. They can create one. They can lay it down. They can, you know, that sort of thing. They have the ability to perceive situations very, very, very clearly. You know, for example, Jesus saw Nathaniel before he even laid physical eyes on him. He said, you know, he's over there under the tree. How'd you know that? Well, you know, that sort of thing. So Christ consciousness, if you can imagine just a loving being that, I mean, think of what Jesus was doing. He was healing, just with a thought. And he said many times, I could bring down a whole guardian of angels, if I wanted to. In other words, you're connected with the highest levels of energy available in this physical plane.
So how do we, as humans, achieve divinity? Or can we?
Yes, we can. I was asked in ministerial school at one point in time whether they thought that, the question was, do you think you can achieve Christ consciousness in this lifetime? And I looked at them and I said, no, because I've got a pretty good idea where I am now, and I've got a pretty good idea where Jesus was. Right. And there's a pretty big gap.
That's a big gap, yeah.
There's a big gap there. Not that I'm a criminal by any means.
I understand.
But
laying your body down over here and that's long.
Yeah, the level of consciousness. I mean, all he had to do was have a thought, and a person was healed of some horrible disease. Whereas in my case, I go to the doctor.
Right.
And that sort of thing. So Buddha said one time, he said it takes many, many, many lifetimes. And there has been some literature that I've read that for a person who pursues the path with a lot of energy and a lot of diligence and that sort of thing, 82 to 85 lifetimes to achieve that. And typically what happens, once you get into those upper realms, you don't necessarily need a body. I mean, take a look at what Jesus did. He actually came back in the physical, and to Thomas, he said, "Here, touch. I'm physical." But then, poof, he was gone. Yeah. That sort of thing. So that's Christ consciousness. One of the things that you can do. That I often talk about, if you're sincere about following the spiritual path, be very, very, use a lot of discretion with what you pay attention to, especially television and movies, okay? The people that you hang out with, and what you do for a living. Those three things, and then what your spiritual practice is. And I'll give you an example.
We talked about that earlier. What church you go to?
Yeah. Here's another one.
And we're going to have to wrap up after this, Doug.
There's much more that I could talk about.
What we got next week?
Let's do it next week.
You want to just talk real quick about that one thing?
Okay, let me talk about one thing. And here's where all the levels of various religions calibrate. And that's something to get into. But there's something here that I want to talk about with addictions. Listen to this. Drug abusers don't recover if they continue to listen to heavy metal rock music. In fact, a 1-year follow-up inpatient and outpatient cocaine addicts study from blah, 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 blah. Not a single cocaine abuser who continued to listen to this violent and negative music recovered. Wow. Self-help groups for the addicted invariably recommend avoiding the influence, in other words, the energy fields, of former lifestyle associations. Right. These addicts found that leaving the drug wasn't enough.
You had to stay away from it.
You had to stay away from it as long as they couldn't make the commitment of will to entirely leave the influence of the field, which was not only the drug, but the people associated with it, the neighborhood, all that. And we talked, many times ago about prisoners who are released, and the retention rate going back is high. Why?
Because they go back to the old neighborhood.
Exactly.
So if you want to reach a higher consciousness, you got to stay away from the. You got to get in a higher consciousness. You got to get around the positivity.
And there's one thing in here, I can't seem to find it right now. I had it marked, but he talks about television, and he said the average television program will take you way down there. Okay, and people who were watching television and they did.
You can actually, according to some of the stuff that you were I'm talking about on Sunday, that he's actually one of the authors actually put wires on people to determine where they were. As far
Well,
as
what they do
they
is
hook them up to machines and they can tell.
that was the first part. But muscle testing is
Right.
nothing more than holding your arm out like this, and somebody will ask a question. It's got to be a yes or a no question, and they'll just press lightly on it. And if you go weak, your arm will go down. If you press, if you are strong. If the answer is yes, it'll remain like that. You don't have to, hook up to all kinds of monitors. It's that simple. But basically, what they said was a person watching TV in a 1-hour program, especially some of the commercials, would test weak. Every time they did it.
And in some of those commercials, can make you go high.
And some of them will,
especially the Super Bowl commercials.
Yeah,
it makes you feel kind of good.
That's right.
Doug, we're out of time.
Okay,
We're out of time. Thank you so much for allowing me to come into your home today.
Oh, that's perfectly all right.
We'll be
You're
back.
always welcome.
Yeah,
here.
thank you. We'll be back next week on Wednesday around 4:00 for more midweek faith lift. If you have any questions about what we're talking about, or if you want us to address something in the future, feel free to send us an email. I'm going to shoot the email address. Put the email address up there. I think it's there. Yep.
Yep.
It's LeishaandBrun@gmail.com. You can shoot us an email and we'll answer any questions. Doug will answer any. I'll try my best. I'm not the specialist. He's the specialist. I ask him all the questions because he studied this stuff,
Yeah, I studied. I may not have all the best answers in the world, but
You've got a lot of information. I saw that library the other day in the background when you were doing your little service.
That's only part of it.
Oh my God, I'm scared.
Perhaps around the whole wall.
Thank you guys for coming out. We'll see you next week.
Take care.